He left.
As you know, this is the measure of an episode, where it is our continuing mission to explore what makes Star Trek a proper Star Trek episode and not just quality or crappy TV. I am your regular host, Jeremy.
And I'm Paul. Thank you, Jeremy, our special guest host of this episode. And the criteria by which we judge these episodes, number one, is there science fiction inherent to the plot? Is there science fiction explored in the plot? Number two, is this science fiction, is the exploration of the science fiction novel or unique in some way? And number three, is there an ethical or moral dilemma presented to the audience through the characters or plotline? And I'm Paul.
And I'm Jonathan, and this week we watched the episode A Matter of Time, which is episode 9 of season 5 of The Next Generation. And the blurb says, reaching Panthara 4 after an asteroid wreaks havoc of catastrophic proportions, the Enterprise crew deals with trying to save the planet, completely ignoring the actual plotline.
So I have to say, thank you, Jeremy, for being on the podcast. And maybe you should clarify, are you a Star Trek fan at all?
At all. Everything I've seen about Star Trek, I like. It's fine. I've never really committed to watching anything.
Okay. I don't know if that counts.
I'm happy to say it doesn't.
Well, I feel like he likes Star Trek in the same way my wife likes Arby's, which is every time we drive by Arby's, she never wants it. And she never thinks to get it. But whenever I bring it home, she's like, that is so good.
It's funny. I feel the same way about Seinfeld. That every time I sit down to watch it, I laugh hysterically, right? But I never feel compelled to actively seek it out.
Okay.
Strange.
So Star Trek is Jeremy Seinfeld.
Yeah, that's
okay.
Fine. And so, let's get this out of the way. So, Jeremy, you know of our criteria. You know, you've heard a few of our episodes.
Yeah.
Do you think this is a proper Star Trek episode?
Yes, I do.
Interesting. Jonathan, what do you think? I
would say yes as well.
Okay, there's not a lot of fighting going on.
Yeah, let's see what we're watching next.
No, I mean, I'll tell you, as a show, if this was an episode, get me into the show, I have my complaints and everything, but, I think I might start watching Star Trek. We'll see. There's a lot of stuff on my list, but it's good.
So this actual episode, I should have guessed this is because this is a very famous episode.
It is, yeah.
For a bunch of different reasons. And I didn't recognize it, and I love this episode, regardless of its Star Trekkiness. But let's go through it, because I am curious, Jeremy, of what your thoughts were, just sort of as a non-Trekkie type of person. And of course, I'm always curious, Jonathan, as to what your thoughts are.
Well, yeah, so I just want to say I completely forgot about the B-plot to this episode, about the time, the planet. And so until they found the temporal anomaly and they saw the ship, I did not remember this episode at all.
Yeah, so you didn't remember? Oh, I see. You didn't remember the B plot. Well, which is basically a MacGuffin in this. It doesn't really matter in the sense, the stakes weren't really riding, even though hundreds of thousands, millions of people 20 million people were going to die. I didn't care. I cared the most about this, Burl, Professor Burl.
Right.
And so it becomes a MacGuffin, interestingly enough.
Isn't he Professor Headroom?
You're right.
Okay.
Right. He's also a very strange character in Eureka.
Yes.
He plays an Australian guy.
The one who does the walkabout.
Yeah. I love that show. Okay, well, let's go through it, because I am curious in the nitty-gritty, you guys' reaction to the nitty-gritty, because there are a couple of things in this that I don't know, jumped out to me. So let's go through the plot. So, as you said, the Enterprise is going to rescue some sort of planetary problem, and they come across this strange spaceship. It turns out there's a time traveler inside who says, I'm from the future. I'm here to watch this really crazy event, or rather, I'm here to watch you, without giving any information, which is supremely interesting.
I felt like the stakes were legitimate until LaForge stayed on the planet. And then I was like, okay, well, it doesn't matter what happens now, because I know that the planet is going to be fine, because LaForge is not, LeVar Burton is not leaving the show.
Right. That's a good point. I want to know what you guys thought about Professor Berlinghoff Rasmussen. I want to know, do you guys think he was kind of channeling Ace Ventura?
So, yeah. I was watching this with my wife because it was in bed, and she made a comment to the effect of, "Who's this dollar store Jim Carrey?"
Totally.
Yeah.
Even though I think this came out this is pre Ace Ventura. Or
this is very pre. Yeah, this is very pre Ventura. Actually, is it? No. This is season.
Well, I don't know.
This is right around
Season
it.
5.
Yeah, this is season 5. So I was going to wait until the end to hear what you guys thought about this, but this character was written for Robin Williams.
Interesting.
Like, this was the script that he signed off on, or not that he signed off on, but that he was like, I love this. Yeah, I will do it. But he just came off of Hook, and his wife was pregnant with Zelda. And so he was like, I can't do it. And so they had to find somebody else.
That's really interesting to know.
How crazy would that have changed? How much would that have changed the episode if Robin Williams? I feel like it would have been
If Mork from Ork boarded the Enterprise, yeah, that'd be a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, even just regardless of the fact that he was just in a Spielberg movie, that it would have just changed the energy. I mean, I felt like this guy Matthew Frewer, yeah, I felt like he did such a magnificent job playing that kind of giddy character,
Right.
Almost kind of channeling the original series villains in a way, where very outgoing, very overly confident in some way, definitely hiding something.
Like a Harry
And
Mudd.
yeah, he did a great job in portraying. Like, I believed that, even though I knew it was going to happen, you can believe that he is from the future, and that all of the explanations he's giving as to why he can't give you any information are real and true. And I felt like they did a great job as the episode progressed to slowly chip away at that confidence in him that he is up to no good. And obviously we needed Deanna to tell us absolutely nothing. It's like, I think he's hiding something, but I'm not sure what. Thanks, Deanna.
I'm so surprised to hear you guys say this. I feel, almost the opposite. I was so put off by him from the very start. And in particular, when they're talking about, like, why aren't there any records of other historians traveling back in time? And he's like, well, obviously we're very good at being discreet. It's like, then what are you doing this whole time?
Right.
It just seemed to really fly in the face of what he claimed he should be doing, to be so energetic and interactive and all those things.
I would be afraid if I was Picard and he said, and somebody posed the question, how come there's no other records of this? That I'd be like, oh, he's going to do something to us. The outcome of when he leaves is going to be bad for us.
Yeah, that he only shows up right there at the end. Like, it doesn't matter if I show up now because none of you will survive to tell the story.
Right. That would have been a terrible harbinger, because it would have said, well, are we going to live through this? And that, they didn't really get into that. They didn't really get into a lot of the temporal dynamics, or whatever you want, the temporal theory of why he shouldn't be there, or the fact that, even the mere fact that you'd think that somebody like Data would say, what you're saying doesn't make sense, the idea that you're not giving us information, your whole presence here is changing history.
Yes.
Hugely. Unless we all just explode, that we're not going to survive this. This is not going to happen. It's kind of like one of those things like, well, why didn't you bring that up? And I kind of missed that in this episode. I missed a little bit of the intellectualism of teasing out why he might be there and the impact somebody like that might have on the ship. But regardless, I can see how he might be grating.
That's so interesting, because yes, his demeanor was grating, but I tried to watch it with fresh eyes, knowing how it ended, and he was definitely hiding something. But I legitimately suspected that he was from the future. I didn't know what he was hiding, but that he was hiding something.
Right.
And so yeah, I was still captivated through this episode. I mean, again, it was kind of trying to watch it with innocent eyes. But yeah, I felt like he was keeping something about this event that he couldn't share, and he wanted to see how it was played out. And especially with the conversation that he had with Picard near the end.
Right.
That was what it was kind of about. I mean, I feel like near the end, when he was kind of giddy around the bridge while the planet below them is kind of dealing with everything. Like that's when I kind of suspected that maybe it wasn't this event, there was something else. But yeah, up until that moment, I was seeing him as like kind of what we talked about, like if there was somebody, a Viking that got thawed, and like the scientists would be able to talk to him, they would be absolutely fascinated, and so he's the scientist being able to talk to the relics.
Like an Encino Man?
Yes.
Yeah, you remember how giddy Sean Astin and Pauly Shore were the whole movie?
Right. Totally forgot Pauly Shore was in that movie. Totally
How
forgot.
did you forget that?
I know.
It's not so much that he was giddy, though. It was what he was giddy about. Like, every single time he was interacting with them, it seemed like he was just rubbing in their faces that I know things that you don't, and this is going to play out differently from what you think.
Okay.
Yeah, impish. Actually, it's... Yep. Mr. Mixsputhik was on the Enterprise, and it was the worst.
Yeah, I think I like the idea. I felt like his behavior promised an ending that didn't deliver, because why would he be there? Yes, it was kind of a big event, but not that big of an event.
Yeah.
And he was stealing things, and he was hitting on all the women. Now, was he hitting on both Troy and Crusher? Or was he just sort of flirting with Troy and going full bore with Crusher?
Yeah, I felt like he was. I felt like he was just trying to make sure that everybody liked him, so they wouldn't suspect him.
Okay, what could be an outcome that was better than what we got? Because he was just a thief, and frankly, him having to remain in the future is not much of a punishment. I understand what else were they going to do, but you've just been transported, what I think he was, 22 or 200 years into the future? Yeah. That's a pretty good outcome for him, I guess. I mean, yes, he's going to space jail, but it's probably not that bad, space jail. And as they said, there's going to be a lot of historians that will want to interview you, and then he could probably leverage that into a nicer life for himself in the future, where there is no disease, there is no poverty. You can have whatever you want out of a little box. So this idea that he would go to the future and want to travel back, it's almost like if someone from the 1800s traveled to now and said, I want to invent the stethoscope and bring it back and make some money in the 1800s, except for the part where it's kind of cool. It's kind of much better living here in 2021 than it is in 1821. So,
oh man, you guys still have pandemics? This is the worst. And so that's what I thought. Like, when I was watching the episode, it got to the end, and I didn't... The actual outcome did not occur to me. So I appreciated that. Like, to Paul's point, like, I don't think there was, like, a better ending than what we could have gotten.
Did you hear that?
Yeah. So the reason we're laughing is not we're laughing at you, is that there is a character on a different television Star Trek show named T'Pol. And you said, to Paul's point. And we're like, T'Pol?
I know.
Speak up.
I was afraid. You have been paying attention to our podcast. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
So the two possibilities in my mind were that he was actually from the future and he was just, I don't know, really bad at what he was doing, or that he was an imposter, which was something that they threw out as a possibility early on. And it got, like, the more time went on, like, I didn't want either of those outcomes. I was like, this show cannot end well. There's no ending here that I will like or appreciate. I was wrong. I mean, I definitely I thought that was a better ending. It made some things sort of confusing for me, like just how much he knew. You could certainly argue that he had access to the information from the 26th century, and so he would have been able to, like, sort of brush up on that kind of thing. But you have to, like, sort of come their way quite a bit because that's not explained.
I was watching kind of with, again, knowing how it ended, and I was, everything that he was saying was very charlatan and con man. He was not saying anything that they weren't already presenting to him. Any comments he made about characters or anything that he was saying about the captain's quarters, like everything he was saying was just could have been made up on the fly just based on his personal observations. Like, he didn't say anything about somebody who wasn't in the room, or just about the room layout in general, like where Worf sat or where the book was whether or not it was on the desk type thing. Like,
Sure, but he seemed to have some pretty intimate knowledge of like who Data was, for instance. He knew that he was an android and all that kind of stuff. There's nothing outward to necessarily indicate that. He's just a weird-looking dude. Were Klingons a species that we knew about in the 22nd century?
Don't know yet.
That's a good question.
So I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like there seemed to be some things that he did not find shocking, but of course, I mean, that would have given up the ghost right away if he was like, saw Worf, he was like, ah!
You're just so much taller than you are in the 26th century.
Well, that's an interesting question. So I didn't watch it this way, but did he kind of come on entirely virgin of knowledge? And he just was gaining knowledge just by talking to people. So did he actually even know their names?
Yes.
Before they said their own names? I don't
yes.
know. Yeah.
He said Picard before Picard was introduced. Also, like the thing that also struck me was I was like, this was the thought that I was like, okay, he's definitely from the future. I guess I don't know why this one was it, but when he said Picard's empath won't like you, they all said, like, he knew that she was an empath, and why would you even begin to guess that?
So he actually did know what was going to happen, theoretically speaking.
Yeah.
Because he did seek them out. It's sort of questionable why he chose the Enterprise at this particular point, or why he chose not to just go back to the 26th century. Why not skip everything, knowing that life will quite possibly be much even better than the 24th century. But the idea that he chose them specifically and maybe did research and actually did know. It's not that he didn't know and wasn't telling them. He did know and was somehow adhering to this idea that he shouldn't tell them the future.
But rubbing their faces in it.
Yeah, like he was enjoying himself. And it did feel like he came aboard the Enterprise initially with a plan. The plan was pretend to be a time traveler from the future. And I think he followed that. And then he kind of let his ego get in the way a little bit. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. But
well,
it did feel like it
too.
kind of it eroded. Yeah, he got his greed and his ego eroded his facade. Eventually, maybe he got, I guess his original idea was to actually steal the stuff on board. But it seems so chintzy. It seems like such a bad way to leverage having a time machine.
Yeah, and why do that on, like, the Enterprise? If you have a time machine like this, couldn't you just teleport to somewhere?
Anywhere. Yeah.
And, like, the Federation, and just, like, find a storeroom that no one's guarding or anything, or go past the guards. Like, just, like, load up the ship full of things that you want to take.
Right. Well, and he has access to any time that has ever existed. I mean, yeah. He could, if he had to do a history report, he could go back in time and get all of these different figures from history to tell their own story in front of the audience.
Maybe get Abraham Lincoln to tell everyone.
Maybe
party
Abraham
on.
Lincoln, yeah. Maybe Genghis Khan.
Which, little reference there, I don't know if you caught it or not, but when he said Adolf Hitler and Khan Singh,
yep.
That's Khan Noonien Singh from Wrath of Khan and Space Seed.
I did not catch that.
Yeah.
And I did. I mentioned I was watching it with my wife. There's the part where Data's listening to the songs, the 4 songs all at the same time. And she asked why they don't, do like more modern things. Like, why is it always things that are that long ago? And of course the answer is that those compositions are in the public domain. But, it makes it seem like no history has happened for the next 400 years. But so that line where he's like next to Adolf Hitler or Khan Singh, I was like, oh, like I do know Wrath of Khan. I saw Into Darkness. So,
great.
Yeah. I thought it was a nice touch that they were like, yes, other history than just the history that you already know about.
Yeah. There is an episode that we watched early on too that I think we talked about it. It's Lincoln in space. They meet Lincoln, and they also
Lincoln in space.
Yep.
I don't know what I'm doing out here, guys. This is the worst.
Just a frozen corpse is what I was picturing.
How'd that run for 6 seasons?
But they did bring in a Vulcan philosopher as well. So that was kind of a nice little touch.
In that episode.
Yeah.
The TOS episode. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the writing is usually pretty good on TNG, even if we don't necessarily like the episode. I almost feel like when they're writing these scripts that I would love to read the draft one in terms of what they wanted to do. Where did they actually want to take this versus what was the time/budget limitations of a concept like this? Because, I think that because this show is kind of lauded as being the pinnacle of science fiction, I guess, not the pinnacle, but very emblematic of what good science fiction could be and can be, that, I don't know, I want to see what their moonshot would be of an episode like this. It just seems very watered down.
Mm-hmm. Well, so I think the thing that felt most watered down to me was the B plot. The planet and everything, like that could have been a full episode on its own. Like that's definitely enough meat there that they could spend, the full 44-minute runtime just fleshing that out and making that the dramatic thing. And they didn't. It was so clearly in the background. And I think that this episode would have been a whole lot better if we had a hard time telling which one was the A plot and which one was the B plot. That, like, here's this very important event. It makes sense that there's this historian that wants to be here because we can feel just how tense this is. And then twist, historian bad.
Well, and I think that speaks to Paul's saying, like, this should have been a two-parter episode. And I feel like I feel like we say that most often with TNG episodes. Kind of speaking to Jeremy's point, like because there is so much meat in the premise that to really get a solid presentation of it, it should be fleshed out more into more than an hour, more than 40 minutes.
We kind of want every really good episode to spend more time on the premise, explore it more because it is such a good nugget of an idea. And very often in 45 minutes, you can't do that. And I do wonder if they had maybe even abandoned that B plot and thought of something different that supported the A plot a little bit better, because it did feel very MacGuffin to me. It just felt like they need something big to be happening, but we're not going to spend too much time on it. Mm-hmm. And it seemed very convenient.
Yeah, the ideas are too good to fit into the 40 minutes.
Jeremy, so do you have, in terms of your knowledge of Star Trek, is The Next Generation in the forefront, or is it more the movies, or is what's in the forefront for you? Well,
so I did start to watch the original series because I did about 5 or 6 years ago decide to sit and watch Star Trek because it's cultural, it's a touchstone. There's a lot of stuff that gets referenced and other things that I do enjoy, and I recognize it as being well made mostly. Yeah. And so, I was going to go through chronologically. And so I started with the original series, and that was a lot of fun. Again, with my wife, there would be times I'm pretty sure this is going to spoil a little bit of the original series for you, but there are so many times where, Kirk has this almost smug satisfaction. He's just a little bit happy with himself. It comes across as very, flirty. I don't have another word for it. And so whenever he would do it, my wife and I would say, "Are you flirting with me, Captain?"
Well, the answer is yes.
Yes. Yeah. Invariably, yes.
Yes.
It was a numbers game for James T. Kirk. Right? He knew if he did it to enough people, he was bound to land something.
He made a bet with a college roommate
that he could bang everybody on the Enterprise.
And off.
Nailed it.
I don't remember what the question was. Sorry.
Well, so in terms of the forefront of your knowledge of Star Trek,
right,
is Next Gen, have you seen other Next Gen episodes besides this one?
Yes, I have.
Next question.
So no, I'd say the original series is a stronger presence in my mind because I've seen more episodes of that. I have seen a few Next Generation episodes, and I'll say that it's been largely passive. They've been kind of on in the background while I've been doing other things, like at other people's houses kind of thing. And my favorite character in all of Star Trek is Q.
Yeah,
sure.
By the way, when you said when I'm doing other things, it's on in other people's houses, I get the impression that when you're burglarizing other people's houses, you throw on Next Gen in the background.
So when I'm doing other things at other people's houses is a euphemism for burglary.
Yeah, burglary. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's known as the Next Gen Bandit.
It's funny you went Home Alone on that. I did too. I didn't want. Sorry, what did you say, Jeremy? You said something that was supposed to move the conversation forward, and I wanted to grind it to a halt. What did you say?
I've seen some Next Generation, not enough to really retain a whole lot. I like Q as a character, but the
Q,
original
that's what it
series
was.
is more in my mind.
So Q, we have not watched any episodes with Q in
Any
it.
episodes, right? I mean, he doesn't really have a lot. I think there's like maybe 10 in the whole series. So,
Oh, if that, yeah.
yeah.
Does he ever show up outside of Next Generation?
He does. Yeah, I think he's definitely in Voyager.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's in Deep Space Nine.
He's in one episode. He boxes with Cisco and never shows up again.
Oh, okay.
He should show up in Picard.
I think
he
he's
does.
going to.
Yeah. He shows up in
Oh,
season
really?
2. Yeah.
In season 2. Nobody knows why or how. Oh, other than they paid him to show up.
Right.
on
Other
the
than
set.
John Delancey has said that's how and why. But beyond that, we don't know.
But I agree. For the longest time, he was my favorite episode. He was my favorite character because I think not necessarily for him, although he was good as Q, but they kind of saved all the good stuff for him in a way. All of the things that they made, like for example, the Borg. They could have easily introduced the Borg without Q, but they chose to do it with Q. And I'm assuming, Jeremy, you know what the Borg are.
I do. I have no idea how it has anything to do with Q, but yeah, I do know who the Borg are.
So, spoilers, Q, I guess just sort of mischievously punts the Enterprise into in the very far reaches of space, I think in the Delta Quadrant or whatever, and introduces humans to the Borg when they much prematurely. They wouldn't have really met each other naturally until the Federation was much farther out into space. And so he does that. We don't really know why he did that.
It was deliberate?
Yeah.
It was deliberate, yeah.
Well, and it's to show humans the dangers that are in space, how they're woefully unprepared. You know, and Picard's like, well, we're doing it anyway.
Right, that's the thematics of it.
Yeah.
And but I think that now, do you know who Guinan is? Guinan is Whoopi Goldberg.
Oh, yes.
Okay. She kind of morphed into my favorite character, mostly because not necessarily because she's in the best episodes like Q, but the gravitas of her character is so well performed and so well like everything. She's sort of the Mr. Miyagi of Star Trek, where everything she says is right and carries weight, and she could probably whoop your ass, and she never loses in a fight. You know, it's that kind of thing, where she's sort of the superhero of the show.
Sounds like you're describing a Mary Sue.
It's funny because she doesn't have any effect on the plot. People come to her for advice more often than not, and she actually has a history with Q. That we come to find out at a certain point. And maybe a history with the Borg. Oh, yeah, definitely a history with the Borg.
Yeah.
But I think it's the fact that she has this, she's like 500 or 600 years old. And she has this.
So she's not human.
She's not human. No. Why would you think she was human? But also, I honestly think, and we've talked about this before, Jonathan, that she is so different from who Whoopi Goldberg is.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That has a big effect on me for some reason. I don't really know why, or that I think that it should, but it does.
It's just nice to see Whoopi Goldberg so underplayed.
Yeah, understated.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
Jonathan, do you have a favorite next gen character?
I mean, with us talking about her, I'd have to say Guinan, kind of for everything you said. Like I love the insight that she provides. I love how she just the way she interacts with other characters. There's that one episode where Riker is trying to teach Will how to hit on women and
canceled.
And he starts making comments to Guinan, and she's like, and they start genuinely having a conversation.
Oh yeah, that scene.
Yeah,
where it kind of starts out as a demonstration of how to talk to women, and then they both kind of get into it.
Yeah,
and Wesley is just like, what are you guys doing?"
Yep. And they're like, "Shut up, Wesley." Yeah. Why are you using my hand?
That's my leg. Yeah,
Jeremy, you understand.
I think Data is like sort of the go-to favorite character in a way.
Yeah,
just because he's so good at being that character, but. I don't know. He's a main character, so
yeah.
I think it's the fun ones are the ones that only show up every once in a while.
Well, and to your point about how Data's an awesome character, I feel like in the first season he's kind of a really great character insofar as like just the whole what is human beep boop boop, but in the
what am love
right.
Am Data love.
You joke, but there are scenes where he's trying to sneeze and he says, a human joke. Ha ha ha. Like it gets as silly as that. So
yeah,
it's annoying.
But I think his moment where he jumps back over the shark is...
That would have made that episode of Happy Days so much worse.
No, where he redeems himself and actually becomes the Data that everybody remembers is with Dr. Pulaski when she calls him Data, and he's like, "Call me Data." Who's your Data?
Well, and Data does get that moment again at the end of this episode where he says, "I'm assuming your handprint will open that door whether you're conscious or not," which is like a drop the mic type of thing to say to somebody,
right?
And it's like normally Data with what he says there is no subtext. It's very direct, and this is that was full of subtext. It was just like a badass line to say for a Star Trek character, for a robot and a Star Trek character.
Well, that's actually an excellent segue back into this episode. That's not necessarily a given. You can absolutely have biometrics that depend on the person being conscious in order for them to work. So I was thinking in the 24th century, no, it probably wouldn't work if they're unconscious because that's a pretty substantial security vulnerability. His whole plot, where he's going to take all these things back with him 200 years and he's going to sell them as his own inventions, that's absurd. If someone took the iPhone back 20 years and you were like, I invented this, and you're like, how?
Yeah. Well, he does say he's a crappy
You
inventor.
tell me.
Yeah. That actually is it's almost a better plot line that he accidentally stumbles upon, which is he should have at the beginning, at the onset, wanting to steal Data. Right? That was the whole plan, and that was what the plot line was for.
Data the character.
Yeah,
Okay.
Data the character.
I believe that's the first time we've had that confusion on our podcast.
So stealing data is a thing.
Oh, I know. I totally understand. But we have never confused Data and Data.
That's true.
But I think also, just to speak to Jeremy's point, that it was more about taking those things back and seeing. I mean, yes, he said kind of release one of these every year, but he also talked about Data and reverse engineering him, kind of seeing how he is put together. And I took from that's kind of what his plan was with all of those things, and see how they work and then build them up again and present them to the world.
But there's still limits to that. Technology is at this rate just exploding in its capabilities, and that's not slowing down.
Right.
I'm sure, it's a finite universe. There are thresholds there, but still sticking with the iPhone as an example, if you took the iPhone back in time 20, 30 years, and, we're talking about 2 centuries in the episode, so I'm keeping the numbers very small here just for comparison's sake. Took it to an inventor, someone who was a computer engineer, and showed them this thing, they would have no concept of the silicon involved or how the display was done or the battery technology. There's just so many things about it,
right?
That taking this back in time 200 years, it's way too ambitious for this guy.
And even if they did figure out how it worked as a device itself, reproducing it would be impossible.
Yeah,
because you wouldn't have the evolution of manufacturing of all of these breakthroughs that have happened to get to that, like an OLED screen. Taking that back for even 50 years, they would have no idea. How do you arrive at this when we don't even have regular LEDs yet? You'd never be able to get there. I mean, it's sort of, well, I guess that maybe that outlines how crappy of an inventor he is. maybe he would have failed,
But he figured out the time pod. He figured out technology from 400 years in the future. He says it took him a few weeks. That is savant level knowledge of this stuff.
Well, and also the idea is that you're going to cause damage if you bring these things back with you by polluting the timeline with the stuff that's not supposed to be in there. Yet there is a time machine in the 22nd century that I'm assuming is still there, right? It's set to go back. So, and I'm assuming he programmed why he would program it to do that.
Oh,
maybe it wasn't under his control. I don't know.
And I'm sure this didn't happen, but it would be so good if subsequent episodes dealt with that. This technology was suddenly a part of their history and it didn't used to be. That's for some reason being so close to the temporal event meant that the Enterprise was immune from the ripple effect through time. but now there was this titanium mesh or whatever it was material that was being used in spaceships and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Consequences.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I mean, they absolutely would do this now. I think they did with Discovery, but just because the show had to be episodic. You know, they couldn't just randomly have something happen between episodes and we not see it or it not resolve itself by the end of the episode.
Well, and the whole idea that, okay, so they would the Enterprise would log this away, this ship and this event that happened with a time traveling whatever, that would go in the books, and eventually whoever invented this time pod in 200 years from now would know about this in some way or have at least some reference to it. And know that this was going to happen, and so therefore it would never happen.
See, I would think all temporal displacement is classified.
Really? I guess it's. I'm assuming that it was part of the Federation, or at least military. That it might not have been. It could have just been some guy who invented it and didn't even know about it.
Well, yeah, like him talking about the time limit. You know, that absolutely makes me think of Sliders.
Totally. That show.
Oh, that's a good point, though. Like, why was there even a time limit at all?
It made me think. I inferred that he was not in control of the ship enough to know to really control it that much.
Yeah.
That it was sort of on autopilot, and maybe he could set where it went, but that it was jumping by itself. But we'll never know. See, this is the stuff that I want them to talk about. Like this is the detail that I would want them to go into that they never do.
Like I can think of things that would be reasonable, that the ship has a built-in time limit because as temporal agents, they want to make sure they don't leave anything behind that they can help. And so it just has to. But of course, I don't know. That as an explanation would mean that they have to explain how it stayed in the 22nd century.
Well, maybe it just keeps jumping every 48 hours or however long he was there. It just randomly jumps to places.
It's quantum leaping.
Yeah.
And it hopes that each leap.
Yeah. I mean, so there is a concept introduced later, I think in Deep Space Nine, where there are people from the future who come back to investigate temporal whatever, crimes or something like that.
They never say that they're from the future, but they do.
Time cops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, Van Damme was one of them. Yeah.
Why isn't there a show about Star Trek that is this temporal unit from the future where they have to go through all of Star Trek and fix, basically Time Cop, the Star Trek edition, Why? Where's that show? That would be the most interesting show.
Yep, but it's not there.
It's not there. They're not going to do it.
I hope they do. I mean, we've already talked about this twice now, but yeah, like it's just such a good idea. It can fill in plot holes. It can do other awesome things.
Well, they have the technology to put them into old shows. They have the ability to be nostalgic but also fresh. Mm-hmm. So I feel like it can check all the boxes that CBS is wanting to do. So I did not give my opinion before. I am definitely a yes on this. I like the episode, and I think it's like a proper Star Trek episode.
Yeah,
of course. But that's an easy one. This is like an easy one.
I know. Like we're dealing with a time traveler, and they have a straight up discussion about whether or not they should use information from the future.
It's kind of handed to us a little bit.
But I mean, talking about the novel presentation, I thought it was pretty novel that the time traveler was from the past and was using technology from the future from another time travel.
Yeah.
So, yep, all three check marks.
Yeah, I agree. Well, should we see what you're not watching next?
I'll watch it. You can't stop me.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. And you can write in and you can tell us your thoughts.
Actually, I don't think our email's working. I don't think we've gotten an email yet.
So, listeners, if you want to help us, if you could just send us a quick email just to let us know so we can see whether or not it's working, that would be great. It's TheMeasureOfAnEpisode, all one word, @gmail.com. So just say like, hey, is this working? And we'll reply back, yes, it is. Thank you. We will reply to the first 100 that we get.
Right.
Before June 30th. I got of 2021.
There we go.
Any June 30th or 31st.
Somebody listening to it July 1st, they're like, oh, I got lots of time.
Yeah. How did they know? Okay, let's see what we're watching next.
Resurrection!
Jesus.
Season 8, Episode 6. Let's try that again. Episode 8, Season 6 of DS9.
There's a blurb, right?
There is, yeah. But it's 2 different places, Paul. I got to get to the other place now.
Make sure it's not a goddamn two-parter. I'm so sick and tired of finding out there's a two-parter. Right. Although I will always watch Deep Space Nine on 1.5 speed.
So
always.
I can't tell you whether or not it's a two-parter.
Because it has sworn me to secrecy.
Well, because if it is, it's part 1 because we've already watched the episode right before it.
Good.
So, and the blurb says, the alternate universe version of Kira's dead love beams aboard and takes her hostage, then reveals that he's running from his world's evil alliance.
And
I like that it doesn't. I can guarantee that it doesn't say his name in the cold open, and that's why it doesn't say his name in this.
Although that's a pretty jam-packed cold open, if that's all that happens in the cold open.
I like the idea, like, it does say his name, but the blurb writer was like, I'm not rewinding.
What was it? Oh, forget it.
Who cares? Stupid show anyway. But thank you, Jeremy, for coming on. And,
Yeah.
Thanks for having.
And providing us your insight. It was very fun. You should come on again. Will you come on again? Pretty please? Pretty please.
Yes.
He's like, I'll have to check my schedule. It's pretty busy.
I mean, that is genuinely
true. Right,
the
truth. You just like to say things in a very hesitant way.
I've been Paul.
I've been Jonathan.
And I still am Jeremy.
And this has been The Measure of an Episode.
As you know.